Kia ora, and welcome to the Beer Jerk Beer of the Week drink along. I'm Luke, and today we're drinking a beer from Shining Peak. If you haven't visited Shining Peak, you probably should. They're in New Plymouth, down in Taranaki, which is where they actually take their name from. So the word Tara means peak, and the word Naki is thought to come from the word Naki. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. N-G-A-K-I, which means shining, which is taken from the peak of Mount Taranaki. When it's covered in snow, it just looks so beautiful. This amazing, just perfectly symmetrical, I suppose like the Mount Fuji of New Zealand. Really, it's an amazing location to fly over and just see it there. So Shining Peak are pretty central in the middle of New Plymouth, and it's a really fantastic brew pub. So it's a really good place to pay a visit to, and they do good food there. And one nice thing they do is they donate, I think it's 5% of the beer turnover that's sold through their tap room each month to just different local charities. So they're very, very involved with just the local community and supporting local charities, of course. But also all of their beers are named after New Plymouth and Taranaki icons. So this is skunk juice, and well, as you can read on the can, skunk juice comes from the chemical blend that's added to natural gas. Something I didn't really know much about Taranaki before I visited, being an immigrant to this country, is that that whole region is really known for natural gas and mining, and that's a huge part of the community down in that area, people that are involved with sort of chemicals and mining and minerals. So this skunk juice is a kind of sulfide that stinks, that's added to natural gas, so that you can detect a gas leak and you don't die in your beds if you accidentally leave the gas turned on. And they've done other beers. I think Peak Petrol is maybe one of my favourite names. A beautiful big double IPA they do. And they've done Octopus Clamp, that's named for the signature move of a local wrestler. That's a really great dark beer. So their head brewer there is called Jesse, who's a local lad that's from the region. And they really focus on some beers that I'm into, so some more traditional European styles. The other day I had their, they did a smoked Scotch ale that's not necessarily that traditional, because it was really quite smoky, but I'm really into that sort of thing. And their Schwarzbiers, their lagers are excellent. They're a really good dry porter, as well as the hoppy stuff, which obviously is what sells and what people are into. So I think they first released this maybe 3 years ago when the New England IPA trend was at its peak. And it is, well, last week we drank the hazy pale ale from south, from Shortjaw, thanks Joe, from Shortjaw, and this week's hazy IPA, so it's sort of like a elevated, bigger version, so it's hoppier, bolder, boozier. It's in at 6.2%, so it's not insane, and you can just see the complete lack of clarity there, which was kind of shocking a few years ago when these New England IPAs first came out of Vermont in New England in the States. And you have these breweries like, I suppose, Trillium and Treehouse and Hill Farmstead that really kicks off these beers. And it was a brewery called The Alchemist that did a beer called Heady Topper that just really kind of changed things. And actually, I'm not sure if it's still printed on the cans, but Heady Topper has a note on the can saying, drink from the can for the best experience. And that's just because, 10 years ago, people would get a beer like this and they thought it looked horrific. Whereas these days, when you're in a pub and you see somebody walking past with a glass of beer that looks like it's banana milkshake, you ask them what it is and you're desperate to go and get one because it's just such a unique, interesting thing. And New England IPAs are the most popular beer, really, in the craft beer world. And they're popular because they're pretty delicious. They haven't got the bitterness of traditional West Coast IPAs. That is frankly an acquired taste. As much as I love bitterness, and well, all of you watching are obviously craft beer fans, and you probably love bitter flavors as well. Things that are bitter are, in our physiology as mammals, we're trained not really to like bitter things, because in nature, bitter things are poisonous. So as much as a lot of the tastiest things in life are an acquired taste, nobody likes Marmite or peated whiskey or olives the first time they try them. And yeah, no one likes bitter West Coast IPAs when they first try them, probably. But most people probably do like a beer like this. It's got really low bitterness. It's got a rounded mouthfeel to it, which, as I was saying last week, that's a trick that stout brewers have used for centuries by adding ingredients like milk sugar to their beers. There's no milk sugar in this, but some brewers use it in their New England IPAs to give a beer just a round creaminess and a soft mouthfeel. And also oats are a major thing. That you've had oatmeal stouts for a long time, and just have a beer that's more viscous, more fuller, softer mouthfeel and body, and that goes really nicely with these New England IPA style beers, which are a fantastic platform for hops. So I'll say historically, but what I mean is 10 years ago, people thought of hops as it's the aroma, it's the flavour, each one's unique. But also it was the IBU wars, which was the measurement of bitterness and how you measured how bitter a beer could be. People were just racing to make beers that were more and more bitter. But actually the most fun part of hops is just the aroma and the different flavours that you have from them. So this is a beautifully aromatic beer, and it's made with some pretty classic American hops that have really been at the forefront of the new movement in the craft beer revolution. So this is made with a good amount of Citra, is the main hop in here, which Citra only actually got released commercially in 2008, which is, yeah, a lot more recent than you might think with, the prevalence of Citra in so many beers. And of course in New Zealand we've got Liberty Citra, which is such an amazing double IPA and a great showcase of that hop. So Citra has a lot of, as you're tasting in this beer, I get a lot of mango from it, and you get sort of tropical fruit flavors. There's some citrus in there, but also there's a sort of almost a perception of sweetness from the fruity flavors that you get in the hops, and just is elevated by this round mouthfeel. And there's also Mosaic in here, which is a lot of people call Mosaic sort of like Citra to the next level, really. So they're both they've got different heritages, those two hops. So I think Mosaic came on the scene about 2012. I might have to check that, as a bigger, bolder, even more aromatic Citra. So moving even further away from those sort of old world European hops, things like Saaz and Fuggles that you'd get from Czech Republic and England and Germany. It's this whole new world of hops. And yeah, as I've been ranting about, the fun thing about New England IPAs is that it's a whole fun new showcase for these different interesting hops. So we had the hazy beer last week, and then if you're watching and you're not part of the New Zealand Beer Jerks Facebook group on Facebook, you should get involved with that if you're on Facebook. So that's a community of about 3,000 or so people that just chat about beers and review beers, talk about home brewing, recipes, beer tourism. So there was one chap that was commenting on the beer last week, and he said that hazy beers are lazy, which I don't blame the guy for thinking that, to be honest, because there definitely was a bit of a perception of hazy beers being easy to brew or being lazy. And I think maybe in New Zealand a bit of that comes from one person. There's a really fantastic New Zealand brewery owner who was really against these hazy beers to begin with, and just held out on brewing them for a year or two. And eventually he came round and did release some hazies, and he's selling a lot of hazies now, but purely for just financially, you'd be mad not to brew hazy IPAs if you brew IPAs anywhere in the world, I suppose, really. But the first two that he released, well, I think the first one was called Lazy Hazy, and the next one was called Tank Sample. So quite dismissive names for a beer that you're supposed to be proud of and are selling, frankly. So yeah, there's a misconception that you save the filtering step, so it's easier to brew a hazy IPA. It's actually very, very difficult to brew a good hazy IPA. The filtering process in brewing and packaging is just part of a process. It's not hard. And in fact, the majority of small craft breweries don't filter any of their beers. It's just a part of part of the process. You might choose to do it through finings or through having a filter when you package. But it's it's not as though you're skipping a step and making life easier for yourselves. But yeah, certainly a lot of breweries out there don't filter their pilsners or their lagers or anything at all. And it just depends on the type of beer that you're making and how long it's in tank for, as to whether it has particulate in suspension. So that's what a lot of smaller brewers have struggled with, to actually create a beer that looks like this, that you simply can't see through. So you have beers that can taste just like this, but don't have the haze, which obviously is what drinkers want to have these days. So a key part of producing a good hazy IPA is just keeping oxygen out at every step, and it's especially difficult when you're dry hopping. So there's been the development of hop guns in recent years, just to make sure that you can actually purge with oxygen, and there's going to be no oxygen. Sorry, you can purge with CO2, so you're not going to have any oxygen that's going to be introduced to your beer. And also, we've just seen some awful things over the last few years as brewers have been sort of finding their feet and trialing things. So you may have come across cans of brown IPA that look like pond water, and that is oxidation. That's simply there have been breweries that have just struggled with their packaging process as they've moved from bottling to canning, and just oxygen has got into the beer, and it tastes like wet cardboard, and it looks brown, and it's pretty disgusting. So in short, it's definitely not lazy brewing hazy IPAs. There has been a real prevalence of them. It's what people just want to drink, so everyone's cranking them out. And I think maybe for some breweries a bit less thought goes into their hazy IPAs, and they just crank out so many of the similar recipe. And also I think during the early days of hazy IPAs in New Zealand especially, perhaps a lot of brewers were making them that had never actually tried a New England IPA. From one of the American breweries that I just mentioned, or in Britain, there were breweries like Cloudwater, Daya, Verdant, that were doing these really amazing New England IPAs. And for me, I think it was in 2018 when I first went to New York, and then I went back to Britain, and I got to try a whole bunch of these wonderful New England IPAs that tasted nothing like what was had just emerged in New Zealand. They just have the I know I keep saying mouthfeel, and it's a weird word, but just have the real body to them. And even now I feel like New England IPA is almost a different thing to hazy IPA. I feel like there's sort of an extra level of just body, of smoothness, and frankly of life. You sometimes do drink a New England IPA, and it's the hops can just taste a little bit tired. And yeah, a beer like this is it is a nice example. It's a good expression of the hops. You can really get a good amount of hop character out of the beer. Anyway, that's enough waffle from me. I hope you enjoy this week's beer. We're going to be back again with something interesting next week. In the meantime, the Fridge and Flagon is opening again this Saturday, so you may want to pop down and see Joe and have a beer with us. We've always got a pretty amazing lineup here at the Fridge and Flagon in Eden Terrace in Auckland. And other than that, we've also got some really cool boxes online at the moment. So if you're hoping that the sun is going to come out and you're going to be enjoying a bit more summer, we've got our summer sampler box, which is 24 different really good smashable beers. It's $99.95. And also I should say that these days we're doing really well with our shipping. So we've always used New Zealand Post, and we pay for their next day service. Whether it's next day or not is a matter of debate sometimes. But in the last bit of time, we've really found it has been next day service, unless you're rural somewhere. So if you have some beers for the weekend, stick an order in, and you'll probably get them tomorrow. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I'll see you next time. Cheers.